Tell me, let me start with Assad. Give me the worst on Assad so we're not surprised. Everybody knows this guy is a real bad guy.
Well, Glenn, one thing that hasn't been addressed enough as people talk about good guys and bad guys, that's really a false narrative. They'll say there's al-Qaeda on the one side, but it's mostly good guys. And the other side, they'll say it's Assad. He's a bad guy. Assad isn't just a bad guy now. Assad has been a bad guy going back for decades, going back to 1979, for example, since when Syria has been on the international state sponsor of terrorism list. Assad has been working hand in glove with jihadists throughout the region, with terrorist groups throughout the Middle East, global groups. He absolutely has been sending funding. He's been providing training. He has the blood of U.S. soldiers on his hands from Iraq, from the suicide bomber pipelines. It's much worse than people realize.
Okay, so really bad guy, yet for some reason Nancy Pelosi and John Kerry both, I remember when this happened, both went over to meet with this guy, and we're like, how are you meeting with this guy? He's got our soldiers' blood on his hands. Yet they went over to meet with him.
They went over to meet with him. In fact, Nancy Pelosi said something along the lines of the road to peace runs through Damascus, or something like that. And the fact of the matter is, when we look at our good guys, bad guys paradigm, and I've broken this down, I'm calling this the Hawk version. This is the we must do something version of what's currently happening in Syria. You see there's Assad on this side. He's a bad guy. And you see underneath him there's Hezbollah, there's Iran, there's AQI. But AQI is actually attached to the Sunni side of the equation. So it's automatically a little complicated, Glenn. But also, Assad not only works through these proxy groups and is allied with these terrorist groups, he's been funding Palestinian Islamic Jihad. He's been funding Palestinian jihadist groups going back for decades. He's been involved with Hamas. His intel officers have been involved with assassination plots, of course, with torture, with terrorism. He's a bad guy well beyond and well before anything we've seen here in the Syrian civil war. But the Democrats, as you pointed out, wanted to be his friend only a few years ago.
And we didn't understand it at that time. Okay, so Buck, help me out on this, because, and correct my thinking. I said today on the radio, yeah, it is going to mean that a lot of people are going to die. There's no good guys to get in here. Well, you didn't say that about World War II. Look at the good we did. And I said, in World War II, you didn't have the rebels, the underground in Germany or in France, being people who were eating people on the battlefield. There was a Western culture that had been lost by the Nazis, and so you actually could repair that. Here in Syria, the rebels are also people that were killing us in Iraq, also hate our guts, right?
That's exactly right, Glenn. A lot of them are. Now, I've showed you this. This is the sort of simplistic version that the media and the sort of John McCain interventionist wants you to believe. On the one hand, Assad, bad guys. On this side, the Free Syrian Army. They're doing a great job. The Syrian National Council. They're secularists. They want democracy. The international community, whatever that means. And then you have a bunch of countries, including the U.S. Well, let's look at the reality on the ground. As you point out, what are these sides really like? Now, on this side, you have bad guys, as I said, more of them than we are generally told about. You have Assad, Hezbollah, Iranian IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, AQI, AQIL, Al-Qaeda in Iraq and the Levant, Jabhat al-Nusra, their homegrown jihadist groups, Abdullah Azzam, a straight-up jihadist group along the lines of Al-Qaeda's ideology, and then Palestinian jihadists. Now, what's interesting, Glenn, is that on the good guys, those are the bad guys, right? Those are the bad guys. On the good guy side, the Syrian National Council, guess who is mostly in control of that? That's the Muslim Brotherhood. The Free Syrian Army, we're being told that they're moderate. In fact, there's such an effort underway to say the Free Syrian Army is moderate that groups like these, Ahrar al-Sham, the Umar Brigade, Mujahideen Dural al-Thaqra, groups you won't really hear about in the press, they are considered moderate jihadists, Glenn. So essentially, they're ideologically tied to these guys over here in AQI, but not quite as bad. And now the question becomes, who's actually in charge of these two? We're told that these guys are nationalists, that they're not really like them, even though they're both jihadists. This is a jihadist flag of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. This is the Free Syrian Army flag. A lot of analysts say these are separate things. They can't be conflated. One is about global jihad. One is about Syria. Look at this video. This is from 2012, February. This was how a new group decided to introduce itself to the world, the Al-Bara ibn Malik Battalion. Guess what? That's an Al-Qaeda flag. That's a Free Syrian Army flag. The two of them together in the video. So all these efforts to say, don't conflate them, there's nothing to see here, folks, no similarities between the two. Well, we have to explain that to them, Glenn, because apparently they think there are similarities because they'll fly both flags side by side.
So, what exactly, what the hell is happening, Buck? Because honestly, it doesn't make any sense at all. Now Syria has come out and said that they'll release their chemical weapons and give them to Russia. I don't know if I believe those guys or whatever. But it makes no sense for the United States of America to be, especially to give the speech to rally the troops. Isn't tomorrow September 11th? Is today September 10? Yeah.
Yeah, Glenn, this is going to turn into a situation where even if we wanted to, even if we decided, and it's very hard to analyze properly the administration's response because we don't know. Is it a pinprick? Is it nothing? Or is it continuous missile assaults? Is it continuous strikes that could actually weaken one side and help the other? Do we trust putting these guys in charge? Do we want to get in the middle of that? When these guys get in charge, assuming that happens and Assad goes down, are we going to stop them from reprisals and killing all of these guys over here? Bad guys, good guys. Who's on what side? It's not for us to decide, Glenn, and more importantly, I don't know if we could figure it out even if we had a major presence on the ground. So, this is shades of Iraq all over again.
Oh, this is worse than Iraq. Come on, this is worse than Iraq. Help me out on this, Buck. People will say, because most people in America are good, Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter, they're good. And when they see people who are in need or whatever, you start showing them pictures of, dead children or whatever. If the media, and the media will show these pictures, if the media starts hyping that stuff up, people will say, well, you've got to do something. You can't just let people die. I said on the radio today that I think you do. At times you do, because you can't, there are things you just can't figure it out. You just can't. There's no good guy here. Do you have a better solution than that?
I don't. I think that containment of the situation through international partners in the region who also have, by the way, their own ideas and intentions beyond ours and not necessarily coinciding with ours. Providing humanitarian relief and assistance, as you know, is at the Zatari refugee camp. The Jordanians are making sure that people who get out don't starve to death, have a place to go, have a place to wait out the violence, so to speak. But Glenn, getting in the middle of this is a disaster. Not doing enough to prevent the disaster obviously is feckless and irresponsible from the perspective of the U.S. sort of intervening but not really intervening. So at some point we just have to accept that we're not in control.
We caused this. We helped cause it. We were the ones, the president was, that got on the air and said, youth, you got to start rising up. The reason why they rose up against Assad is because they saw what happened over in Egypt, and they saw that we supported and the rest of the world supported, and so they started it. Am I wrong?
Well, they did think that this was their version starting in 2011, their version of the Arab Spring. But Glenn, let's keep in mind, the best case scenario, I've showed you all the scary groups here, groups you won't generally hear about in the media. These are groups that are torturing people, that are sawing people's heads off, that are eating people's hearts. Okay, the best case scenario is this. We get a political group taking charge after Assad is gone that is already dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood, although they won't say that. They'll change the name. They'll make sure that it's the Freedom and Prosperity Party or something else.
It's the same. I mean, it's a rerun of Egypt. I mean, if we're lucky, a rerun of Egypt.